Hey everybody, welcome back to another Facebook Live interview with America's Future Foundation. I am your host today, Ericka Andersen, and I'm excited to be joined by James Misner. He is the SVP of Strategic Engagement at World Relief. Thank you so much for joining us today, James.
Thanks so much, Ericka. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, it's the month of December. Obviously, people have giving on their minds. People are thinking a lot about some of their favorite organizations to donate to. And as I was thinking about this interview, my mind started to go to, well, what are some of the organizations that I really support and that I believe in? And World Relief came to mind as one that I think is doing great work. So before we launch into that side of things, though, if you could just tell us a bit about yourself and what World Relief does and your position with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm James, and like most of you, I'm working from my spare bedroom at home right now. I've been at World Relief for 8 years, and the whole idea of World Relief is how do we really bring lasting change in some of the world's biggest problems. It's not just 2020. The world has really enduring problems deeper than what we've all experienced this past 9 months. And so whether that's immigrants and refugees in vulnerable situations in the US right now, trying to do things legally in the right way, or people living under systems of violence and oppression or abject poverty overseas, we're trying to intersect in their lives in ways that bring lasting change, so that when our constituents and our community engage, it's not just a Band-Aid on top of a problem, but we're really dealing with the underlying issues that perpetuate the challenges in the lives that people face.
And what drew you to working with this organization specifically?
Yeah, I think a little bit of personal story involved with that. Typical undergrad, went to DC to do the whole save the world bit, and realized that was not my scene at all, and switched from the political science sphere more into international development. And along the way, I met this wonderful woman whose parents were asylum seekers to the U.S. From Central Africa. She became my wife, and I really dove deep into the immigrant community here in the U.S., as well as to communities in East and Central Africa, and realized, there's so much power and entrepreneurialism and ingenuity in these communities, but systems really hold them back. And if we could really tap in to that latent energy that was there, these people could do amazing, amazing things. I just wanted to spend the rest of my life kind of unlocking that, so that they could be who God, in our language as a Christian organization, has called them to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. I noticed on Facebook, doing a little research, that you and I share a couple of friends in common from the DC area. I went to the Congo several years ago, and so I have a special place in my heart as well for various African countries, the Congo being one of them. So that's really cool, and probably one of the reasons I'm drawn to World Relief as well. Let's talk a little bit about the role of private giving, the role of donors in your organization. Obviously, you have to have those to survive and do your work, and I'm sure you have many wonderful, incredible people donating from large to small. I mean, it really takes all kind of sizes of donors to make an organization work. So, in your role, what have you learned about how people choose to give, why they choose to give, and the amounts maybe that they're landing on?
That's a great question, Ericka. I think there's probably a few different trends that I've seen over the course of time. You have your big kind of private philanthropists who will go to school, learn about an issue area, really just want to engage really, really, really deeply. That's absolutely amazing for us, because those folks can make a big and really targeted difference. But then what I've learned about people like you and me is that we're really attracted to organizations that tell a story of lives being changed. We don't want to, most people, I should say, don't want to put a Band-Aid on top of a problem. They don't just want to serve one meal to people who are hungry. They don't just want to take a person out of poverty for a month. They really want to find enduring and lasting solutions. And they want to be a part of a community who cares about that. So as I've done this work now for a number of years, just the more that we can find communities to draw people towards, that they can dive deep and bring lasting change together, the more that it helps donors engage with the work, so they don't feel that they're at arm's length away, say from Congo, where maybe they'll be able to go once in their life, if at all, but they'll be able to, through that community, meet program participants, meet staff who are members of the communities that we serve. And when people come together to do that, whether they're giving, $5 a month, $50 a month, or, writing $5 million checks, when those relationships form and you really see that change take place in a person's life, that really does something to those of us who are givers and donors, to let us know that that check that we wrote, or that credit card information we put into the website really actually makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, I know. I have been so it's almost like you can't even choose to stop giving at that point, because it's sort of ingrained in who you are, and it's part of your identity to be participating in these kind of things. Now, you guys are, I think you're a pretty big organization, but obviously you have various pockets of components that you have people on the ground working more closely. How do you think that aspect of things, when you're talking about a private charity like you guys, how is it that being there in the communities, seeing the day-to-day, how does that make a difference in making sure that the money is being spent in the best way possible?
It makes all the difference in the world. We can sit back, in the U.S. or in our privileged, spots in the U.S., and we could make decisions on behalf of vulnerable immigrants and refugees. We could make decisions on behalf of people in Congo or Asia or Latin America. And 9 times out of 10, those decisions are well-intentioned but wrong. We don't have insider local information. We don't have the knowledge that's passed down from generation to generation in these communities as to how things work. And so one of the things I'm most proud about in our work at World Relief is just how in every community, our leaders are from that community. They're from not just that country, but they're from those districts and provinces, and even down to the village level. And they understand how things work. A story, I think, to illustrate this, one of my favorite parts of the world to work is a community called Turkana. And that's on the border of Kenya, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Uganda. And they have really significant nutrition challenges there with kids under the age of 5. And one of their biggest challenges in that is that newborns generally have failure to thrive quite quickly. A Westerner could come in and try to do all kinds of solutions on top of that, but only a local would know what's really going on. And what's really going on is that a newborn in that community, isn't allowed to breastfeed until they're named. And the naming in that community comes from the father of the child. And because of changing climate cycles in the region, the dads have to go further and further away with their herds of goats. So instead of naming the baby, right when the baby's born, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days. And that tradition is so ingrained in the community that any outsider, know-how on health and nutrition means absolutely nothing until that child is named. So until you deal with that and figure out a solution to that problem, you're still going to have infants with the failure to thrive. So having staff, an amazing group of staff that have that knowledge because they are Turkana themselves, helps us really to find solutions to enduring problems like that. And there are stories of the same nature from all over the world. So that local insider leadership knowledge is key to being successful in anything we do.
Oh, that's so true. That is such a great example of, of course, you can't just go in there and tell people what to do. It has to be a culture thing. It has to be a long-term thing. I think that's so great. One thing I wanted to ask you was, I don't know if you're dealing directly with donors yourself, but in that world, what kind of questions do you get from people that are giving? Like people that are investing their money and they really want to know, like, what's going on with this? Do they ask a lot of questions?
It varies. Some people, if you make them feel good, you're happy. But the number one question that I get, and I do engage with our givers, every single day, is, will my money make a difference? People deeply, deeply desire to give of their resources in a way that actually changes something. They want to know that when they write the check, when they make the credit card transaction, that something in the real world actually changes. And they want to know that a person's life has changed. We get all kinds of questions, but nearly every single person I talk to asks some variation of what changes when I give this money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are the kinds of, I'm sure you guys send out resources, newsletters, things like that. What are some of the numbers or the things that you sort of regularly put out there to let people know what's going on?
Yeah, my favorite community at World Relief is a community of monthly givers we have called the Path. And every single month, path makers, as we call them, are getting updates via email and text messages as to what's happening in our projects around the world. And this group absolutely loves that their money goes to immigrants and refugees in vulnerable situations, and they love to meet those people on virtual events and in newsletters and things like that. But they also love that their resources are helping people in South Sudan and Congo and Malawi and Cambodia. And that kind of, here's a person, here's a local staff member, here's something we're doing in the government advocacy arena, and they just get that every single month and get to engage around that. That community is really on fire and just loves to engage more deeply in the work that we're doing around the world.
Yeah, you mentioned monthly donors. I think that's an interesting one. How important are monthly donors as opposed to just like someone that donates a big chunk at Christmas?
Monthly donors, I would argue, are the most important thing for organizations like ours for a few different reasons. One, it's what to expect from a monthly donor. You don't have to wait all 11 other months of the year to say, hey, is Ericka and her family going to give to us again this year? You just know that every month, that person and their community is engaging with you. So that helps with everything from financial projections to figuring out, okay, we see this need and our staff have elevated it. How do we actually engage? Well, we have the funding. Obviously, big gifts are great and we love those. But the real muscle, the flywheel, if you will, of organizations like ours are people who chip in a few bucks every single month so that we can plan for the future and help our communities on the ground really thrive as they grow and they shake things up.
That's good to hear. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize the importance of being a monthly donor to a place that they support. Now, I know for almost every organization, the end of the year fundraising is such a huge part of the total budget for the year. Do you guys run sort of frequent other kinds of fundraisers throughout the year? Do you do targeted ones in different areas? Just curious how that works.
Yeah, about a third to half of our private revenue comes in October through December, during this period where we're thinking and being thankful at Thanksgiving and celebrating the year-end holiday season. So it's really big for us, and we kind of put a lot of energy and effort behind that. But all throughout the year, we're really engaging with our monthly donors, really doing everything to try to engage with them and to get new people to join that community around holidays, around partnerships with influencers and artists and all those different types of things. We also really try to use days that are symbolic to drive people to engage. One of those days that we're most proud of is our efforts around International Women's Day every year. I forget the exact number this year as we're wrapping things up here in the next few weeks, but it's between 85 and 90% of our program participants are women and children. And so International Women's Day is a huge deal for us. And so we've just done a lot over the past few years to kind of champion that as both a cause and a way to engage people. And there are, a dozen other days like that we really try to take advantage of and engage people with, both so they can understand more deeply what's happening around the world, as well as they can engage directly with it.
All right. And now, is there anything, just last question, you might say to someone just to maybe encourage people to really take a deeper look at considering becoming like a monthly donor at a place that they support? Why does it matter so much that we personally are making these choices and not just relying on government programs?
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're considering, like, what do I do this year? 2020 has been a hard year for all of us, and none of us have known, which way is up and which way is down, from day to day and week to week. It's also a time when the world needs people like you the most. And from just my conversations with folks around the country, most people feel immobilized. And over the course of the pandemic, even as hard as it's been trying to figure out, how to work from home, how to juggle working from home and taking care of your kids and all of that stuff, I bet that all of us have felt a bit of disequilibrium. We've experienced that, recognizing that many of us are really blessed. And even though we've experienced hardships this past year, I imagine that most of us listening to this aren't waiting in a food pantry line later on this afternoon or tomorrow. I think one of the main reasons that people should engage is for their own satisfaction and well-being, realizing that their efforts, that the resources that they're generating from their career and their work are being used for things that are much bigger than them. And I think that gives each of us a huge sense of joy, even in the midst of turmoil, especially right now when the world needs it most. And then Ericka, you asked about kind of government money, and we do take government money at World Relief, but the government can only go so far. It has its role to play in things. Our most innovative programs don't come because the government put out an RFP, for us to apply for. Our most innovative programs come from our staff and our givers who get to know each other through relationships, coming up with ideas to serve vulnerable populations together. You mentioned Congo. We run an amazingly innovative peace-building program in the eastern part of DR Congo, which is one of the most violent parts of the entire world and has been for 3 decades. The UN, the US government didn't come up with our peace-building program in Congo. Community members, staff members, and some private individuals and churches went on a trip, probably like what you went on, Ericka, and they said, nothing is going to change in Congo unless there's peace. So let's find a way at the grassroots level to bring peace into our communities. Everybody in the governmental space thought it was crazy at first, but now 5, 6, actually 7, 8 years later, they're realizing that in those communities, it's one of the only things that's brought enduring peace. And it didn't come because of the government. It came because of some individual givers in the US and our staff with local knowledge in the region designing something together. And now everybody wants a piece of it. Everybody wants in on it. But it was because private individuals that used their talents and their treasures and their entrepreneurialism rolled up their sleeves and figured it out.
I love that so much. That's such a great story. Now I'm going to have to go look at this because it's been a while since I've checked in on Congo goings on. But for a couple of years, I was very invested in it and did a lot of reading. And so I think this is my tip to go back, see what's going on, see what you guys are doing there. Thank you so much. I think what you've provided so much great information, and I know that most people don't need a lot of motivation right now to be giving here at the end of the year. We're all sort of on that bandwagon, but January is going to roll around, and every organization is still going to need that funding. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ericka.